Today, I have the great pleasure of being with the chief meme inspector of Bitcoin Twitter. We have the most handsome and the most funny Bitcoiner from Germany on one podcast. What a treat. Today, we're going to talk about a not nerdy take and topic at all. Chris, welcome to the show. You are not a usual suspect when it comes to the show and mining. But just recently, we had the whole BIP-110 topic. That's what I want to talk to you about today. Tell me, first of all, which chain would you have mined and why?
I prefer the permissionless chain and the chain with the most chain work and the one that has the product market fit that I like. So it would have been Bitcoin with the ticker symbol XBT. So
HashrateUp, hardware sales, advisory, hosting, and site brokerage. Find new and used ASIC deals through the website and the Telegram channel below. Make smarter decisions with HashrateUp.
People who go to conferences, they will know your face because you are a founder and CEO of Seedor, a seed stamping kit for private keys. You do Bitsurance, you do many other things that are non-mining related. How come that you are seemingly so knowledgeable about chain splits and how all of this works? Is it because of your infamous to some and famous quiz show to others? Why is it that you have so much knowledge about it?
Bitcoin is my livelihood. I care deeply about it. I'm enthusiastically learning new things every day. And I'm in exchange with a lot of people that actually can affect change in Bitcoin. And this topic came up, and I saw from the get-go a lot of misinformation, and I saw a lot of people that are well-meaning and that I do care about fall for sophistry and platitudes with regards to what is actually going on and how to deal with certain things on Bitcoin. And so the culmination of that was last Saturday. Finally, it took almost a year. We can discuss what happened, how we got here, and the motivations behind that.
So the goal for this, Chris, and the motivation for me to do this is, first of all, it's very current. Right? We had the chain split this week. I do not know enough about it. And I suspect that many of the people that follow the show and my clients will neither, right? So a lot of people have their hash rate, they're mining, they're paying their bill, they're mining Bitcoin, cool. But the fact that this hash rate, there's more to it, right? This is going to be a show about that. It's not just some commodity that you produce and then Bitcoin magically appears in your wallet. There's more to it, right? And so the end result of this show is that people have a better understanding of what the chain splits are, why BIP-110 led to a chain split, and all of that, right? So where would you say is the best place to start? Basics first, what happened and why? Or where do you want
basics, I would say we start in 2023. So Bitcoin has been around for a couple of years now, and it has monetary properties. So we use it to pay for goods and services. We use it to, the main layer that is actually being mined, we use that to build wallets and second layers. We use the Lightning Network. We use different other layers on top of that. And Bitcoin itself is this perfect network that has no downtime. And people sometimes get bored, or people sometimes want to explore new things. And some people started not only using Bitcoin in a monetary, in a fiscal sense, but also to mint NFTs, to trade JPEGs, to put arbitrary data on chain. And that made people very angry. That initially, like in 2023, we had certain phases before that. That was like ebb and flow. Like we had hype phases, fees rose, they went back down because all these projects, they have a very short lifetime. But in 2023, it seemed different. Suddenly, we saw fee spikes of 100 Satoshi per VByte, which for a miner is quite nice because you get handsomely paid. Suddenly, you're not getting just the block reward, the Coinbase, like the fees actually matter. And however, that prices out actual monetary transactions. And we saw people mainly in the global south, being excluded from Bitcoin as a monetary network because people could no longer afford to open small Lightning channels. Because if a transaction fee is $50 and you want to open a Lightning channel of $25, that doesn't make any economical sense. And yeah, so people took, a lot of anger to social media and said, like, we have to find a way to kick these JPEG spammers off the chain. And theorizing that, a lot of people had like different proposals, but all of these proposals essentially run into one ultimate like killer, and that is information theory. Like Claude Shannon, the guy after which we named this ubiquitous AI, he came up with information theory, and in short, it says anywhere you can embed any kind of data, you can embed steganography. Like you can embed a JPEG that with another tool can be reinterpreted. Like you have different encodings, and Bitcoin Core, the client, would not display the JPEG, but you can use other software pointed at the blockchain and then read this out again. And there's nothing, literally nothing you can do to stop it. With enough effort and motivation, you can embed any data in various places in Bitcoin. And the worst place to do that in Bitcoin would be something called a fake pub key. So if we transact Bitcoin, we have a private key. So that is your seed words, for instance. And with a private key, you can prove, hey, these are my Bitcoin. And these Bitcoin, they are on something that is an address. That address is a hashed public key. And when you embed data from the outside, you don't know if this hashed public key is actually Bitcoin that has a private key, or if it's just a hash that was ground. Like you can use a machine to grind a fitting pub key, and instead of using that to be ever able to spend it again, you use it to embed a JPEG. There's nothing that you can do to stop it, and the Bitcoin blockchain stores like the block data as well as the UTXO set, like the unspent transaction outputs, all of the Bitcoin. And yeah, those fake pub keys we would store theoretically forever. So if this accrues, if this becomes bigger, the cost to run a node in the network might become more expensive. So right now you can run it on a low compute hardware. You can use a Raspberry Pi, you can use an old laptop. Due to AI, SSD and RAM has like steeply increased in cost, but it's still like the blockchain grows slower than hardware prices like rise. So like it's actually becoming cheaper to run a node. But if more people use Bitcoin to store data that can never be removed, because again, if you have an actual pub key and there is Bitcoin on there, and you have one Bitcoin, you split it in 100 of those pub keys, eventually somebody can consolidate them and reduce the amount. But if they are fake, they will forever be in this UTXO set. And yeah, that could lead to nodes becoming more expensive, and that in turn leads to more centralization in the network. And if we have a centralized network, we can see it with other cryptocurrencies, then it's very easy for authorities to affect it. And that's what we're trying to, avoid.
Okay. Centralization, decentralization, that's a scale. Couple comments from my side, right?
Yes.
I would say global south, I can understand that argument. I live there, right? So this affects many people in my immediate circle. I can understand that. Decentralization argument, I think, my opinion or gut feel tells me, and please tell me if I'm wrong, that Bitcoin is extremely decentralized on the node basis. And we are very far from the centralization being a problem. If you look at Ethereum, Solana, all these other chains that need AWS to live, we're very far from that. Okay.
Yes. So to run a full validating Ethereum node, you need to have a proper architecture. It's really, really difficult, and the burden to join that as a validator is
okay,
not possible.
Explain to me again after I summarized the following, right? So you're saying some UTXOs will not actually have a transaction behind it, but they will have essentially data in a different format behind it. That data cannot be, you cannot take all these UTXO and consolidate them to save on fees, right? The example I always have is, okay, imagine you're going to the coffee shop and you now want to pay your $5 coffee with pennies only, and you don't have a $5 bill, right? There's less energy required for you to spend $5 in one $5 bill than it is to carry a lot of coins around. So you have a lot of small transactions. If you want to spend them, now fees go through the roof. Now some people are excluded from being on the main chain because basically the fees eat up more than the value that they want to transmit. And then that doesn't make any more sense. Explain to me again why the data, the transactions with the data behind them instead of a pub key cannot be consolidated, please.
So there are many different places you can put data that is harmless for the network. But in the past, there has been a push to remove those allowed places for data because people argue that sends the wrong signal, sends the signal to people that spam, you're welcome here, because clearly there is a dedicated place for you. And against that argument, I pose, if you limit those areas where we could prune or effectively remove the data eventually, and people are motivated to put data there, they will find a way. And one way that is inevitable is a fake pub key, because if you log Bitcoin to an address, there will be a private key to that address. But if that address does not exist, you grind it because you want to have this in a different format, so it's like translates to a JPEG. There won't be a private key to that. And when you send Bitcoin to that, because you want to have this in the blockchain, so you would send a transaction with a low amount, maybe the dust amount of Bitcoin, and then those Bitcoin are burned effectively forever because they sit on an address to which nobody has a private key. And because we try to track all of the Bitcoin in something called the UTXO set, and that is currently, I think, 12 gigabytes. And yeah, over 180 million individual UTXOs.
So you're saying, by saying, hey, let's remove these parts of a Bitcoin transaction, let's remove these data entry points or possibilities, we would have the adverse effect. It's a bit like the government trying to fix a problem and then having the adverse effect to what they actually wanted to achieve. By introducing renewable energy to the system, you want to make power cheaper, but in actual fact, you make it more expensive because now you have to balance the grid.
I mean, essentially, if you distort like signals, there are sometimes worse outcomes. And the entire history of spam on Bitcoin is far longer than 2023. If we go back to 2013, 2014, there was a protocol called Counterparty, and they used those very fake pub keys. And the developers very quickly realized, okay, this is bad because we store those forever. Here we have this unused opcode called op-return, and we can use this as a data carrier, because once you spend to an op-return, that is similar, like you can send messages in Bitcoin and other types of data in these fields, at most 1 megabyte. We know those can't be spent, therefore we can remove them from the UTXO set, essentially giving spammers a place. And maybe we should also talk about the difference, what a node actually does. So if you have a node, it is a time traveler. You send it all the way back to January 3rd, 2009. And this node has consensus rules. And this node looks for the Genesis block. And then from that block, it verifies each and every subsequent block until it reaches the chain tip. It literally goes back in time and sees a new block coming in and then checks all the transactions in there. Do these Bitcoin exist? Is this a valid output script? Is this actually a private key to that? Is all of these things, are those valid? And then it runs through to the end and waits for the next block. If you are a miner,
This is, sorry, Chris, to interrupt you. This is what takes 2 days. When you set up a new node, it takes a long time. I think it's even 2 weeks or something for the node to
It
fully
entirely
sync.
depends on your connection. Like you can do it in less than a day. It depends on your hardware. It depends
Okay.
on your data plan.
But it takes time.
But
Okay, understood.
it takes time, and there have been a lot of strides with Bitcoin Core version 29, 30, 31, 32. Like we've lowered this amount. Like we call this IBD, initial block download. We lowered this by almost half now. So there are, essentially you can write better software, you can make it quicker, because it is, the database in Bitcoin is quite, it's not optimized yet. So your node essentially now is synced to the chain tip. And if you're a miner, you would look for transactions, and those transactions are submitted by other people to their node into the Gossip network, into the so-called mempool. Every node has a different mempool. They see some transactions earlier than others. Sometimes they don't even see those transactions. And a miner would take a bunch of them, put them in a block, find a nonce, find a valid block, and then present it to the network. And then other nodes would verify, yes, all those transactions in there, are valid. Some of those I've already seen. I've seen them in my mempool, and long before this block arrived, I validated them. If there are new transactions in there, I first have to connect to another node and ask them, hey, can you show me this transaction? I want to verify. And that takes a little bit more time. So we try to optimize, because essentially we've realized the cost of a node is not necessarily like the hard drive or the RAM. It's very often just the data velocity that we can transmit through the network. So that's why we also don't want to have enormous gigameg blocks, like just 4 megabytes to sync quickly.
Okay. Just to add context, this is why block times take 10 minutes, right? Because it takes time. We don't want to do this in 10 seconds because we want to give every node a chance to keep up and have a chance to sync. Correct?
Exactly. Instead of like, we want to be like, we want to have a global state. And if block times were like, I don't know, on Solana, like a couple seconds, it is impossible due to relativity that two nodes on each side of the planet would have the same. Thereby we like tricked, we went slower, and 10 minutes is a long duration, and we set the difficulty adjustment to mine so that almost every 10 minutes a new block will be found. So I mentioned two things, consensus and mempool relay. So consensus rules on Nakamoto consensus is what we call Bitcoin. So we started with version 0.1. Satoshi wrote it and said, like, this is Bitcoin. These are the rules. And Bitcoin as a software is like never finished, because there's new discoveries, new vulnerabilities, new bugs. And Satoshi left the product in 2011, and other developers took over. And of the initial code that he wrote, like there's now 90% is new code by different developers. We've optimized it. But essentially the cornerstones of that, like there's no more than 21 million Bitcoin, and like this is these things are fixed basically. Like we could change them because it is open source, and people did so. Like somebody came and said, hey, I want to do Bitcoin times 4, and he called it Litecoin. Like it's always possible. You have to convince people. And so we changed things, we added things, and then we have hard and soft forks. A soft fork would limit rules, a hard fork would allow new things. And with a hard fork, you always have a split. With a soft fork, new rules and newly updated nodes are basically backwards compatible. And you can run a node today, version 5, instead of version 32. And it would gladly sync to the chain tip and would see certain transactions, would pass them as valid, wouldn't know what they mean, but it would not fall out of sync. So we spend a lot of time to make sure we do not touch other people's money. We do not limit cases. We make sure everything is backwards compatible. And that is why Bitcoin consensus is something that is really slowly and difficult to change. We've done it in the past, and we'll probably do it in the future, but it's not something that we ever rush in the sense that,
sure,
this is my idea, let's do it tomorrow.
Got it.
So that is consensus. The other thing is relay. So your node, as I mentioned, has a mempool. Standard would be 300 megabytes. Some have a gigabyte of mempool, meaning Bitcoin is a flat fill network. Like transactions come in, they find their way into a block, and other transactions that paid a lower fee usually get left behind. Most miners, they do not act ideological. They don't say, I like this transaction more than this. Like they check who pays me the most money. I want to make SASA.
Would it make sense, Chris, if I ran a node as a miner, would it make sense to run a node with a huge mempool so that the chance of including all transactions that pay the most amount of money are in my mempool to select from?
That would absolutely make sense, but generally I would say like one gigabyte would be sufficient, because then you have many blocks of buffer. You can only put as much Bitcoin transaction into one block. There's like diminishing returns if you increase it, but it is good to have a larger one, because in the past we had periods where the fees were very high. A lot of people tried to get into a block, and if you only had nodes all over the globe with 300 megabyte mempools, everything that didn't fit in those, like you replace those that pay a higher fee, all the others get dropped, and people would have to resubmit them. But as long as there's a few nodes that have a larger mempool, even if those smaller ones clear, they will learn about those transactions from the others, because they're all like, there's a peer-to-peer network. You're not totally connected to all 80,000 nodes. You maybe have like 10 or 40 peers, but you always are in touch with your peers. So there are rules. So we have the Nakamoto consensus rules. Those describe Bitcoin. If you try to submit a transaction that is outside of those rules, let's say you want to mine a transaction with 22 million Bitcoin, those nodes will say, hey, man, this guy is full of shit. Like, let's drop this transaction. Right? We will not put this in the mempool.
This is not Bitcoin. Yeah.
This is not Bitcoin. And then there is a subset. If we imagine like a Venn diagram, like there's a circle of Nakamoto consensus, and then there is a subset of standard transactions or relay policy. Essentially, we've decided, okay, some of those transactions are like, if we go just for the highest set per VByte, sometimes we are not making the most profitable block, because certain transaction sizes, depending if they use the witness, depending how they are constructed, are not properly like finding their way in quicker. So we have a set of rules to make that better. We also have a set of rules to protect our nodes from DOS attacks, because most users have like an old laptop or like a Raspberry Pi or like a low compute computer that does not have a lot of like computing power or RAM. And it is possible to construct transactions with like a lot of script inputs that take a node of that size a longer time to compute. And if I send those transactions, your node is busy, and I send another one, is very busy, it can happen that your node crashes or like hangs up. And that could be an attack vector. Like if you run a BTC Pay server, if you run a Lightning node, I could peer to you and I could feed you transactions that are valid according to Nakamoto consensus, but they are very idiosyncratic. They're very heavily computational, and we try to limit those attack vectors, and by saying, okay, certain transactions will get dropped from the mempool, like we're not allowing them. Theoretically, you could, as a miner, take those transactions and mine them, and they would find their way into a block. But for that, you would have to change your relay policy. And that is basically like a node config that every person who runs a node can choose for themselves. And
okay, so hold on. I think this gets us a bit to the meat of where we're trying to get, right? Let me ask you this. Who decided that change? Who decided that the default setting on every node would be to exclude those transactions? This episode and podcast is sponsored by Altair Tech. Altair is built by miners for miners. And if you need a strong, reliable partner that provides ASIC hardware, replacement parts, accessories, or practical support around mining infrastructure, from commercial miners to control boards, PSUs, PDUs, cables, and consulting, they are a proper one-stop shop for Bitcoin mining gear. If you are building or expanding, check them out at altairtech.io.
So in Bitcoin Core, Greg Maxwell and later Peter Wahler, they came up with the relay policy, essentially saying, okay, we need to do this to protect nodes against DOS, and we need to have these certain rules. For instance, theoretically, you could create a Bitcoin transaction with 0 Bitcoin input and 0 Bitcoin output. These have happened in the past. You could have 1 Satoshi as a Bitcoin transaction on chain, but those are dust amounts. Those are amounts that are more expensive to move again than their own values. Therefore, they would just add to the increasing number of UTXOs in the UTXO set. So we decided, okay, the lowest amount of Bitcoin we can send, is around 500 Satoshis. That is a dust amount, and that is purely a relay rule. And these relay policies have been around for a long time, and they only ever have been relaxed, basically, because people are very creative. They find their way around it. And instead of combating this with new rules, we just write better software to make optimizations in, giving a low compute hardware now the power or the algorithms to quickly verify something that would have taken a longer time earlier. So we try to just write better software. In the end, the goal is to get rid of relay policy, to only have consensus, but we are a long way from that. And so that is relay policy. And one of those relay policies was, as I mentioned earlier, this op return limit. So according to Nakamoto consensus, you can put into the op return field 1 megabyte of data. According to standardness rules by relay policy, you can only put transactions of 0.1 megabyte size. So the largest op return that would be relayed nowadays would be 0.1 megabyte. Even though if you create a transaction of 1 megabyte op return, you can submit it to a miner, you can get that mined as well. It is consensus valid. And in the past, Bitcoin Core had this limit much lower for op return. It was at 80 bytes. So from 100,000 bytes, it was 80 bytes. That was deemed enough to incentivize the guys from this Counterparty protocol. Instead of using fake pubkeys, you use this piece of data. It's enough for a string, enough of the information you want to put in there, and people will not abuse it. That was the theory behind it. At the time, there was also a different node implementation. There are nowadays, 8, 9, 10 different node implementations of varying sizes. The most common used one is Bitcoin Core. Then there is Bitcoin Not, maintained by Luke Dasher. There is Floresta. There is LibBitcoin. There is BTCD. There is essentially different programming languages behind those sometimes, and they all have the same consensus rules, but they are different in their relay policy sometimes. Bitcoin Nots, for instance, always had 42 bytes for the op return limit. And again, the consensus on both nodes is 1 megabyte, but they decided the relay limit is just lower. And essentially, that is when things, in 2023...
When shit hit the fan.
Shit hit the fan again. So we had these spam onslaughts in the past. And as we all know, a JPEG is not a great store of value. If you believe in the free market, I fully understand that there might be a hype phase where people are excited about JPEGs and the price rips. But long term, nobody is interested in digital art, and that price craters, and then it's boom and bust, and that hype usually dies down. And so it was also in 2023. Ordinals came on, they had a brief moment of glory, and then the price cratered 99%. Bitcoin stamps came, Bitcoin runes came, all these meta protocols that had some way of putting arbitrary data into Bitcoin came, made miners very rich, priced out Bitcoin users from opening Lightning channels, annoyed people, and that made people so angry that they said, we have to do something against it. And initially the reaction was, okay, to change consensus rules is really difficult because we have to, again, find consensus. And that is also, we should get later into how that is found or what that is. But initially the reaction was, okay, we need to limit this through relay policy, essentially saying we prevent people from spamming or from the spam getting to the miner. So if we are on this decentralized network, we should all reduce our relay policies so that the transactions that are submitted with JPEGs, they don't find their way to a miner. But, and that is the beauty of a decentralized permissionless network, you can route around this. And you would want to have this property in Bitcoin because if we could censor transactions, that would be bad. Like those could be monetary transactions. Like a government could say, okay, we censor transactions from these kind of people or transactions that look like this. And we know that even if just 1 or 2% of nodes relax their relay policy, essentially those transactions find their way to a miner. Like 98% of nodes could lock down their relay policy, and I myself as the spammer could either directly peer to a miner and submit my transactions to like a service like Slipstream, or like preferentially peer to a miner, or other people that have relaxed relay policies, or like Peter Todd has a node implementation called Libre Relay that has much, much broader rules. Again, also not outside of consensus, but closer to consensus. And so quickly people saw, okay, it doesn't make any sense to try to furrow your brow and wag your finger and encourage people to limit their mempool policy. We need to reduce consensus. We don't want the spam on there, so we need to close all of the avenues. And to me, initially, I thought like this is a non-starter, because information theory, we know we can put data there, and it is a cat and mouse game. Like if we have this new venue and then we close it, and then the spammer will find a new one, and it takes us much longer to close it than a spammer to find a way around it. And the inevitable end game is those fake pubkeys that I mentioned earlier. So that is the end game. That is like the place where we cannot do anything because we need pubkeys to transact Bitcoin.
So you're saying that the lesser evil is to keep as is, let them do their thing, rather than try and fight it, and then we end up with a worse situation.
Exactly. So we just basically give them a garbage can for which they pay handsomely. Mm-hmm. So for op return to put a transaction in, it is quite expensive. And we know, like inscriptions, they basically abuse the witness discount. Maybe that's too much for this episode, but like there's a way to store 4 megabytes of data on a Bitcoin block. As I mentioned earlier, op return only allows for 1 megabyte. And that is cheaper, like the 4 megabytes can be per byte cheaper than the op return place. And therefore, if we remove the op return place, there is no incentive not to use the cheaper alternative. So
okay, what is the counter argument to that? So what's the counter argument to saying we need to still get rid of op return? Because it seems so to steelman it. I understand why it makes sense to follow your route. I want to say.
So the steelman argument to limit op return, to limit other avenues, is to send a signal. So if you have this garbage can and say, here's a garbage can, you can put your stuff in. We don't care because we can essentially prune it. You send a signal that people like this, degens, spammers, NFT enjoyers, that they are welcome. And that makes people angry. And I believe there have been in the past many of these protocols. They came and went. Only Ordinals managed to have like a pretty long lifetime of like 2.5 years or so. And I think it is due to the fact that it made one specific dev very angry. Luke Dashier, very renowned Bitcoin developer, he was furious. And anybody who has kids knows if you get mad at something, like that makes it more exciting. If you lean into it, if you give the drama attention, that is what essentially these JPEG enjoyers crave. And that prolongs the inevitable death of these projects. Like as soon as you give it attention, it helps them. And as soon as you close down this one avenue and they have to come up with a new one, you essentially breathe a new life into this. So I get why you would say,
said be water.
So yeah,
my
I get
friend.
why you would do this, but yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
it is.
so,
It is like
so to me, it seems like it's a bit of a left side, right side of the bell curve issue, right? Left side, me saying, if it's allowed, let him do it. Who am I to say what is allowed to be on the chain or not? If it's consensus rules and it leads to that point, and people want to pay a lot of money to do what they do with ordinals or whatever, who am I to say that's not allowed? You shouldn't do that, And what am I going to do about it? And then you go through this whole mumbo jumbo drama, right? And then on the right side of the bell curve, you're at the same exact point.
yeah.
Because
On the right side is Claude Shannon's information theory. On the left side is it is their money. They can do whatever they want with it. If they want to burn it for a JPEG, that is retarded, but it is their right. And in the middle, the midwits say, no, we have to act, we have to do this. And essentially, I think that is counterproductive. And that is how this whole drama began and started.
Okay.
People went through with saying we need to change consensus now. And to change consensus, that is difficult because what is consensus? So who calls the shots in Bitcoin? You and I, we're node runners, we are investors, we use Bitcoin to transact. Some of us are miners, some of us are exchanges, some of us, control the ticker symbol Bitcoin. All of these things, they have a value. And in order to change something in Bitcoin, we need to convince enough people so that everybody comes along. If not everybody comes along, there will be a split. And we have two chains. We've seen this, for instance, with Bitcoin XT or Bitcoin Cash or later versions. And then eventually there will be a free market where you can exchange those currency pairs, Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash. And then we will find out, okay, which of these chains is valued more. And essentially, the market then decides, okay, maybe Bitcoin is worth more than Bitcoin Cash. But it is very difficult to measure if you have consensus before you have consensus. So what do? Like we signal with our nodes, we signal on social media, we sign letters, we go on podcasts, talk about it and support. And some of those metrics are more difficult to fake, I would say. Like people in this debate looked at, for instance, node counts and saw, hey, this initially very obscure node implementation, Bitcoin knots, like I was one of the first 200 people to run it back then, suddenly increased. And now some people claim 20% of the network run this node implementation maintained by a single guy. On the other hand, Bitcoin Core maintained by around 40 people, over 100 people contributed, much more, let's say, peer review, much more solid software. Why are people choosing this software? Like, there must be something behind it. But again, node counts can easily be spoofed. You can have 1,000 Tor endpoints on a single node. You can go to Amazon AWS and you can have like a light node at like $5 a month or something, and you can so-called Sybil attack something. You can show that you are many, even though it's controlled by one person. The same goes for sockpuppet accounts on Twitter. If you check accounts and this account is like from 2024, or this account has very few followers or very few replies, is this actually a real person? And then there are exchanges that are incentivized. Hey, I want to have trading. I want to list this coin way in advance. Like in Bitcoin, we had various forks. We had a fork called Bitcoin SegWit2x as a proposal after SegWit that we increased the block size again. And you could trade futures markets, essentially prediction markets on SegWit2x long before that fork would ever launch. And the disastrous, price direction of SegWit2x essentially killed it, because everybody was dumping their Bitcoin, the SegWit2x for more Bitcoin, showing that there is no interest in it. So prediction markets are a very important tool, because you can check, okay, somebody is not just putting their reputation, their voice to it, but skin in the game. They bet money, and that is something you can't really Sybil. But yeah, so finding consensus, or rather building consensus, takes a long time. and the crowd around the, let's say, anti-spam movement, they came up with a activation client and immediately assigned a number to it. It was initially BIP444, later BIP110, and they chose 7, later 8 different things that would like to change in consensus, essentially adding a lot of things and instead of just one thing. So it launched with Bitcoin Core, removing the 80-byte limit because this was subverted. Like we could see 2 years prior, people were submitting more than 80 bytes in op return. Bitcoin Core decided, okay, this limit is no longer useful. We remove it. It's again an expensive place to store it. It's a place where you can remove it anyways. Like there is no harm to the network. This made people angry. They decided, let's change relay policy. This didn't work. Now we do it in consensus. We force back the old relay limit. But we don't stop there. We add further points that we want to limit, because there is not just op return spam, there is inscription spam, there is places in tab script under op-if where we can put data, and they try to surgically remove those avenues. And that is something that's, not really welcome with most developers, because usually you do one BIP and one change. You don't cargo count many together. If they are related, like sometimes we did this in the past, but they have to be like properly related. And in this case, it looked very weird because some of them, limit actually useful monetary use cases of Bitcoin. And so people started to run this new software client announcing, hey, I want this to activate at this block height. The block height was reached last Saturday. And maybe we should field questions. There was a lot of things.
Yeah, so we had a 40-minute lead up. And this is, I have to say at this point, it's very, what's the right word? It's very impressive to see how much in the detail and in the weeds you are with this, and it's exactly why I wanted to do this, right? And I don't mind how long this is going to be, because people.
You're saying we lost the audience already. I agree. So we should
100%, dude. At 40%, 40 minutes, most of them are gone. But we're doing this show for the 5 guys that listen through the whole thing, right?
Or ladies.
So I want to take one step back. So explain to me from your perspective what the justification was of this group that was proposing these changes. I think that is important to mention. What was their justification? I remember, them quoting Satoshi and what Bitcoin is and what it isn't and all of that stuff. Do you want to just spend 2 minutes on that?
So the motivation was to show the world Bitcoin is a monetary network and it is not used to store arbitrary data. And I agree with that. So I welcome monetary use, but my faith in the free market is not so shaken that I think that we need to change consensus to force people into smaller avenues, because I know those that are motivated to circumvent them can, and by limiting consensus, we make it worse for the actual intent for the monetary purpose. But the motivation is we need to show the signal that they are not welcome, and we need to limit those abused opcodes so that there is a certain sign to the community, hey, we are no longer taking whatever spam you send in the future. Like all the past spam, we can't do anything about it, but like for the future, we want to limit those things. Mm-hmm. And
you said something. Yeah, got it. So I want to, before we get into the chain split that happened at the mentioned block height, I want to just go back and forth with you on something else. So you mentioned consensus. What is consensus? How can we signal for it? Okay. And this is something I've wondered about before. At the end of the day, in my opinion, and I think you share that, the money decides what consensus is. The node runners can signal, right? But at the end of the day, whatever coin the market accepts and puts their money behind that is what is going to have the highest security budget. That's what's going to get the mining. That's what's going to add security, adoption, and that's sort of the cycle, right? We saw that with BTC Cash. There was a split. Somebody wanted to make the blocks bigger. Some people wanted to keep it smaller. And at the end of the day, the market decided that the current version of Bitcoin that we have, the non-cash version, is what is Bitcoin, right? So that is how consensus was at the end decided, because now the market capitalization of Bitcoin Cash is such that it doesn't make sense to mine it. It doesn't make sense to spend the energy to provide a security budget on that chain. Therefore, there is no security on that chain. And the current Bitcoin hash rate that we have, the 900, 800 exahash, can overtake that network and do with it whatever it wants. It can use it as a play ball. So there's no security, there's no value there, right? That's how I understand what at the end of the day consensus means. And what I would like your point and your feedback on, the issue I see with that is that all of this stuff is so fucking complicated that the average person buying Bitcoin to protect themselves against inflation, who has now a voice in this consensus because they put their money behind it, has zero fucking chance of understanding even the beginnings of all of this, right? You extend that to all the pension funds, all the ETFs, all the money that sits with BlackRock, all of that buying Bitcoin on the stock market now has the same voice, and arguably more because there's more capital, right? They don't understand this stuff. So what does that mean for Bitcoin's security as a whole? Because it's kind of a conundrum, right? So the market kind of needs to understand the technical details to make sure that Bitcoin stays secure, right? But there's no chance it can. At least I don't believe it ever will. And then we end up in a situation where humans always end up. Sorry, one more thing. There's a bit of a lag. One more thought, that we always end up in the situation as humans where we vote for representatives and they make the decision for us, right? And then that kind of ends up centralizing Bitcoin again in a way. I don't know. Give me your color on what I just said.
So yeah, I agree and I disagree with certain things. So what you said, like you give away your voice to representatives, basically like a key opinion leader. I look up to this person, what he decides, I go with that person. He has been right in the past. I think a lot of people do that. We should aspire to like have a higher understanding ourselves and to make an informed decision. But I understand how most people are not 24/7 locked in, such as ourselves. So that is highly unlikely. In this event, in this fork, pension funds didn't give a shit. They didn't look at it. There was so little support. It was like less than 1% hash rate. There was 20% of nodes perceived. If you did up and you looked, and it was actually just 5.9%. Like a lot of those nodes were fake, and there was virtually zero economic support from any large actor, any exchange, anything measurable. And to me, the ultimate kill shot, there was no prediction market volume. There was nothing. Like there were millions upon millions of dollars in the Sector 2X futures. There, like on every prediction market, like whether Donald Trump's speech is like 2 minutes, there's millions of dollars there. On predix markets, there was like 4 Bitcoin or so on liquidity on this thing. So I understand why Michael Saylor up until last week didn't mention BIP110 once.
So my question, just on that point, is exactly where I want to go with this, right? So is there no support shown because people disagree with the proposed changes, or is there no support shown because people don't even know it's happening?
I would say they managed to have an outsized portion of mind share compared to the actual support that they enjoyed. So actual like mining pools, actual like custodians, they put out opinion pieces, actually having their researchers look into this and form an opinion, even though in my opinion, and I was proven right, this thing is dead on arrival because of how inept it was structured, how rushed it is and how this is contrary to everything that we do in Bitcoin. But I want to add on like your earlier point that a pension fund or a large holder, or that capital always decides. I would disagree with that to a certain extent. So it is a voice. It matters what Michael Saylor says. It matters what Coinbase says. But essentially, it is down to the users, you and I, to also have a voice, because they are very afraid of owning a shitcoin. They're very afraid of mining a shitcoin. They're very afraid of losing customers. So your voice matters. And Michael Saylor with 800,000 Bitcoin does not have 800,000 times more of a voice than I do. He guaranteed has a larger voice than I do, but it is not proportional to the Bitcoin he has. Like, he does not have his Bitcoin in self-custody. I don't believe he has a node. I don't think, like, he is at the behest of Brian Armstrong, and like whatever he decides, that happens to his Bitcoin. Like, maybe he has a say, but it's rather, I'm more sovereign in that regard. And
my point, Chris. I hear what you're saying. My point, to further explain it, is, let's say Saylor owns 10% of all the Bitcoin, right? And now there's a chain split, and there's 2 coins, and he takes all of his money and says, "This is now Bitcoin. I think that this will be Bitcoin." Now, that's his votes, and he has, because of the capital volume, much more options to push the valuation of a second alternative Bitcoin than I have. So therefore, I would say that his votes, that he just has more votes in general because there's more capital behind it. Now he can push the coin. Now there might be more mining, and now there's more of a battle around it, right? But that's because a large chunk of money took that one position. If BlackRock says, "This is Bitcoin, these are the consensus rules, that's where we're going to put all the capital shareholder money," then it's going to be a lot more of a competition with
yes,
BlackRock versus you and I, if we disagree, rather than a Bitcoin Cash, where there is, from the get-go, it's a shitcoin, there's no capital behind it, people don't want it, whatever.
With Bitcoin Cash, we had a lot of capital behind it. A lot of companies were behind it, and Roger Ver had tons and tons of money and Bitcoin, and he pumped up the mining, the hash rate initially, and the price rose, and all of those things. But like on a long enough time scale, I think the dust settles, and like the intelligence of the masses like figures things out. So, and I truly believe that in the not too distant future, there will be a push by BlackRock or Saylor to maybe ossify Bitcoin, maybe to just have it as a shiny golden rock. They are not interested in the permissionless nature. They're not interested in privacy technology. They just want to have it as a scarce asset. That, to me, is not Bitcoin. That is not enough. Like, I want the scarcity, but I also want the medium of exchange in Bitcoin. Michael Saylor, as a billionaire,
otherwise the scarcity is worthless.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, but like the scarcity, like for Michael Saylor, that is enough. Like, he can have all these synthetic derivatives. Like, he does not care one bit about increasing privacy on chain.
Fair enough.
That's not him. And in the future, like, if there might be a split, I think there will be more people interested in the medium of exchange Bitcoin than that. And that is the great thing about it. If it comes to a split and you have Bitcoin in self-custody, congratulations, now you have 2 on each chain. And you do not have to dump immediately. You can hold, you can wait, you can make your voice heard, and you can just figure things out slowly.
This episode and podcast is sponsored by Luxor, not just a pool. If you mine Bitcoin professionally, they offer the most complete platform out there. Pool, firmware, hardware trading, hashrate markets, fleet tools, energy optimization, and hashrate index data, all built around serious mining operations. Whether you are running one site or scaling across multiple locations, Luxor gives miners the tools to manage hashrate properly. Learn more at luxor.tech.
I think it's another podcast, right? You just said the word ossify that I was thinking of as well. Like, and I think this is where the current version of Bitcoin, again, to further my argument, always has an advantage, right? The current version of Bitcoin always has an advantage against a new proposed version of Bitcoin, because there's simply capital that doesn't care. So by default, it goes with the current consensus. And that in itself, I think, ossifies Bitcoin. Because now, if you want to adopt this new version of Bitcoin, you have to be actively involved. You have to make the active decision to go there, right? Yeah, maybe, I mean, you, as you said, you end up with 2 coins. You hold both. If you do nothing, one of them will lose value, I guess. But you guess what I'm saying? Like, this is what my point. Like, you know, the people that I talk to about Bitcoin that are older than me, they don't know what happens on Twitter. So by default, they will go, without them even knowing it, they will ossify Bitcoin, partly because they go with the consensus that's around now.
Yeah, I mean, but that is like the Pareto principle, like 80-20. Like, you do not have to be informed about what your money does or where a consensus moves. You can just use it, and then you are surprised if something changes.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin is a living, breathing thing, and like we work on software to make it better or fix bugs. And it's like, in my opinion, not possible to ossify. But again, that's a different podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back to like what happened with BIP110. So suddenly, like, we have this proposal, and a lot of people start, putting it into their profile picture next to like a Ukrainian flag or whatever. Like, this is the current thing. I support BIP110, and suddenly a lot of people are like, again, voicing their concern about Bitcoin turning into a data storage instead of a monetary network. And this proposal had 2 activation mechanisms. So if 55% of blocks in a difficulty adjustment, so 2016 blocks, if 55% of those signal for BIP110, it will activate in the next difficulty adjustment. If that doesn't happen, there is a forced activation height, and that was last Saturday. So that was 1
year. Can you explain
out.
what does it will activate actually mean?
So meaning the BIP110 nodes, they have this reduced consensus. So this is my node with this consensus rule. A BIP110 node has this. It is just same rules, but some are like now reduced and smaller. So every transaction that a BIP110 node makes is valid on my node, but transactions that are on my node might not be valid on a BIP110 node. And during the period of 1 year, the node would verify and deem valid everything, even though some of those transactions, they contain spam. They would not be valid once it activates. They are now still valid. And
but just to be clear, like, just because the difficulty adjustment has 55% of node signaling for it or whatever, it doesn't change what my node is doing remotely, correct?
No. So, but what would happen if 55% of the network decide, okay, yeah, BIP110 is cool, let's do that, and your node does not upgrade to the new consensus rules, and then a transaction that is illegal on BIP110 nodes shows up in your mempool, and somebody also not running BIP110 mines it into a block, and your node sees it and says, yes, okay, this allows, like, this is valid on all my rules. The BIP110 chain will split off because they say this block is invalid and this is not the new chain tip. We are still looking for another block. And at that point, you have 2 chains. And Bitcoin works the way that we have this network topology, and a Bitcoin miner will find a block and then send it out over the nodes peer-to-peer. And then there might be at the very same time somewhere else also a miner also finding a block, a different block that is also valid. And those, basically you have 2 fronts in the network where, like, okay, these nodes saw this block first, these nodes this block first, and we are aware that there are now 2 blocks at the same block height. And then miners can decide, I'm building on this block, I'm building on this block. And then there's a race, because once this chain becomes longer, more nodes will build on top of this, and this will be stale. Essentially, this block will be worthless, and all the transactions that are in there might not be confirmed. That's why we always say on-chain transactions, you wait like 6 blocks, and then you're sure. And also, if you find a block, you are rewarded handsomely. You get some new fresh Bitcoin. you cannot immediately spend those. There's a cooldown period. So if you have a new block, you have to wait 100 blocks before you can spend those Bitcoin. And that is a very integral part of Bitcoin. Because if you have this block raise, you didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, glad I came on. So, and the essentially when you have this raise, this person would have gotten 3.125 Bitcoin. This one had 3.125 Bitcoin plus the transactions, and it wouldn't make any sense if they then transacted that into another block that maybe is on that chain, and then you had more than 21 million Bitcoin because this block and this block paid out the same Coinbase, and that is why, again, we have 144 blocks a day. You have to wait 100 blocks before you can essentially sell those. You
because
can
the likelihood again. So just to explain, the likelihood of a chain split happening and both chains being 100 blocks long is extremely low. So
exactly. Usually, we see this quite regularly that miners find blocks and then there is a race between them. It's quite regular, but usually we don't see more than 2 blocks or so difference, and then all the other miners discard the old chain and go to the new one, because again, you're incentivized as a miner to make money, and if you build on a chain that might not become the longest or the chain with the most chain work, then you rest.
And I'm wasting my energy.
Wasted energy, exactly. It's also one of those things I just mentioned, in the Bitcoin white paper, it says Bitcoin is the longest chain. That is something that Satoshi got wrong. It is the longest valid chain, but the one with the most chain work. So theoretically, I could create a node client starting from Genesis now with a ridiculously low difficulty, point my Watts miner, my latest generation Bitcoin miner at it, and create in a very short period of time 900,000 blocks or 980,000 blocks, essentially outpacing the current Bitcoin blockchain. And then I would have the longest chain. I could say, hey, hang on, all these Coinbases, they are mine, and this is the longest chain, and that is Bitcoin now. But because I changed something in order for me to rush through all the difficulty adjustment, to rush through all the blocks, each block does not have the difficulty, essentially the block weight, or the highest amount of actually work being put in compared to the actual Bitcoin blockchain. That is the beautiful thing about Bitcoin as opposed to Ethereum as well. I don't know what the Ethereum blockchain is without trusting a centralized server. I can't go out and look for one. With Bitcoin, I can have my load and listen and see many different chains possibly, and essentially find the one with the most chain work. And then I can be realistically sure through the laws of entropy that must be the one true chain, because I have not seen a single one with more work.
Proof of work. Yeah,
exactly.
Got it.
And again, we see these rather often, but that is part of Bitcoin. And with BIP110, because this movement never, at no point they had more than 1%. Leading up to it, they had 2% of nodes or miners, mining nodes signaling for BIP110, way off the 55% target. And usually, all prior soft fork attempts and or successful soft forks, we aimed for well over 95%, not 55% of miners, because we did not want to risk splitting the network. We did not want to do that. And they should have said, okay, clearly there's no support for this. Let's, put it in the bin. Nope. We have this fixed block height in the future, 1 year from now. And at that point, it's mandatory. All the BIP110 nodes will reject all the blocks that contain spam, that are not BIP110 valid. Okay. And that is what happened Saturday. I think it was 10:30 p.m. Central European time. Yeah. I was in my car. We were Tone Ways and Adam Back and Merch and a bunch of others. We had a live stream, and the Bitcoin network did what it always does. You can try to predict how many blocks, what is the block height and the time associated with it, because we expect less than 10-minute blocks. But leading up to it, the Bitcoin network found 8 blocks in 20 minutes, which was kind of insane. That kind of sometimes happens. Sometimes we have like 3 hours without a block.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was in my car and had to do a live stream, and then we observed then in real time how the Bitcoin blockchain split. So at this forced activation height, essentially all the BIP110 nodes would look for a new block, and once it arrives, they would check if like it abides by the new BIP110 rules. And the first block, I believe, was found by Antpool, and it clearly did not abide by those rules. And immediately there is a chain split, essentially saying those BIP110 nodes do not accept this new Antpool block. We are waiting for our miners. And at a point, they had, I think it was 16 exahash in a network of almost 1,000.
Ocean, basically, right?
It was basically just Ocean, but not all of Ocean. So Ocean without curtailment, like according to Nacho, they have like 40 exahash and like 16 or so pointed to they had like different stratum datum endpoints, and they pointed then to the BIP110 side. Like it was up to them. That's the great thing about Ocean. You can essentially, as a hasher, become a miner by having your own node, creating your own block template, and you have much more control where you point your hash as opposed to a regular FPPS pool. So I'm a big fan of Ocean. That BIP110 movement came out of Ocean because Luke Dasher is the Chancellor CTO there, and like a bunch of people that work there. But not everybody is on board there. Like I know, like Jason and like Bob Burnett is also like not a big miner over at Ocean, but he was not a BIP110 supporter.
Yeah.
So
I remember.
Yeah, so we have this block split. So Antpool has a block, BIP110 chain does not have a block. Suddenly they find a block. There is this ominous new miner, we don't know who he is, called Roughnecks, and they find a block. We have a race. So we have one block on BIP110, one block on Antpool. And if a new BIP110 block is found, this would be the longest, most valid, most chain-work chain. And in their mind, the game theory then dictates a miner would not risk to build on top of this block with a block that is not BIP110 valid, because all those nodes, and we can't really gauge how much hash rate is behind those, they would then discard that. There would be then, of course, 3 blocks again, but the BIP110 nodes would not accept a new one, and they, from their game theoretical viewpoint, thought any sane miner would then limit themselves and reduce like their transactions that are allowed to our rules. Essentially, we, even though we are a minute minority, we could force the network by threatening them that they would lose their coin base if we have the longest chain. But mathematically, if you have like 10 exahash as opposed to 1,000, like only 1%, like you find blocks 100 times slower than like the rest of the network.
Sure.
And they had surprisingly a lot of luck, because the next block, I think it was F2 pool, shout out to Chun, like he found a block on the non-BIP110 side, so it was 1 to 2. And then right after, in an amazing feat of irony, like the screenwriters did an amazing job, Ocean Pool found a non-BIP110 compliant block, like the rest of the miners over at Ocean that were not
from simple mining, right?
Was simple mining. They found the third block, and at that point, usually 2 blocks ahead, with that amount of chain work and with that difficulty, it is that race has been spoken for. And then I think they found 18 more blocks or so until they found another block. So like the chain stalled out, like 300 blocks or so. They found 2 blocks, the chain stalled, and the miner Roughnecks said, like, we're calling it quits. We stopped doing the mining because they expended energy. They found 2 blocks. They could have mined on the proper chain in a pool, would have been paid handsomely. Instead, they paid energy to mine a chain that essentially does not pay out Bitcoin because, again, of the 100 block cooldown. So,
talk to me, Chris. Talk to me about the power of pools in this scenario, and what would have happened if, just by pure dumb luck, the pro BIP110 hashes would have found like the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th block.
I mean, that would have been a very, very peculiar string of good luck. I think the largest pools, they did not pay attention to that. They would have then just built a regular old block on top of that, and then we would have a split again, and then like the BIP110 miners would have to find again more blocks. But like the rest of the network has so much more hash rate that the likelihood that they would then continue building on the non-BIP110 compliant chain is much, much higher. So it would have been entirely different if last minute, I mean, there's absolutely no reason to do it last minute. Like every large pool could have signaled for BIP110 over the course of a year if they wanted to. They could have signaled without actually mining compliant blocks, because leading up to it, all you had to do was signal. Essentially, you don't have to like limit the block. You just have to say, yes, I'm ready. And not a single one did that. One can argue that...
Sorry, go ahead.
One can argue that the largest mining pools, they are like the most centralizing force right now in Bitcoin. So we have Foundry, we have, I mean, F2 pool is like 15%, but like we have Endpool and Friends, and in total, like we assume almost like 50, 60% of the hash rate is controlled by very few entities. And these pools, most of them are full paper share. They essentially have one node that dictates the block template, and some of those nodes in the past have mined blocks with a very poor block health. Essentially, that says they excluded high fee-paying transactions for whatever reason. Some of those reasons could be, hey, we censor OFAC compliant transactions. We try to censor Bitcoin because we are whatever, like an American mining pool or something, and we do not want to mine North Korean transactions or whatever. And that is, again, like a centralizing force, because what is, can be applicable to Kim Jong-un can also be applicable to Yesser, and we don't want that. And so that's why I welcome efforts like Stratum V2 and like Datum with Ocean, that you have more power given back to the hashers. Essentially, they can create a block template, and even in a pooled mode, you can have your own block template. You get the Coinbase from the server, and the server can theoretically cheat you a little bit if you're below the threshold, but you would find out quickly, and it is a step in the right direction. But most of the big pools, they didn't care. What would have been funny would have been if at the last minute a large pool, let's say Foundry, signaled for BIP110, and that would have changed the game entirely.
So Foundry let their miners choose. That's what I wanted to just give a shout out to. Yes, it's permissioned, so that's a problem. But it's an American mining pool, and they, according to the news that I read, they let their miners choose what they wanted to mine.
To be fair, they let them choose in the most retarded way possible, because the deadline to choose was the activation height, like not like a week prior or something, or like, and it was not like I don't think the total tally, like the end result, was ever published. I know from my internal sources that like not more than 15% like cared about it, or like not many people even responded to that.
So this is goes back to my earlier point about the ossification and the money, and it's not aware of all of this. Dude, I can tell you, miners, they don't care. Miners have no idea how Bitcoin works, because it's a dumb fiat game. You have $1 per kilowatt hour cost, and you make money $1 per kilowatt hour. Yes, it's in Bitcoin, but at the end of the day, the $1 per kilowatt hour number counts.
That is the game theory of Bitcoin that I ascribe to, not the BIP110 game theory, but the actual game theory is, if everybody is the most greedy, we have the highest security. If Michael Saylor buys all the Bitcoin, that pumps my bags, because this is a limited amount of Bitcoin. If a Bitcoin miner wants to have more hash rate, he buys more miners, and then in turn, like, he has a higher share of the new hash rate, and he can get more Bitcoin, and we have much higher protection against 51% attacks. And they don't have to understand Bitcoin. And the great thing about it, they pay electricity most likely not in Bitcoin. Therefore, they have to sell Bitcoin as well again. And so we have a better price discovery because there's more liquidity in the market. So I think it is the perfect asset because we have this perfect game theory where everybody just thinks for themselves.
It's a beautiful thing. All right, Chris, what did we not talk about? Anything that we still need to cover?
We steered around the entire topic of what is an economic node. Like that is something that is, I think, the thing that most people misunderstand. So if you want to effect a change in the future, if you say, hey, I want BIP448 covenants, I want op template hash, I want a new change in Bitcoin, who do I have to convince? First, you have to, of course, convince developers to write code, to write applications, and then you go to like the people and ask them feedback. And this can be like us pleb sloppers or philosopher kings or like podcasters or whatever. And you can make it more digestible from the technical point. And then you have to go to the miners and give them a reason why they should also support it. And then, you should find as many economic actors in Bitcoin to support it. And it is not one node, one vote. A lot of people in BIP110 misunderstood that. They thought, hey, we have so many nodes now and it is a democracy. But Bitcoin is not a democracy, it is anarchy. And my node matters to me. Your node, Jesse, I care less about than my node. Some nodes I don't care about at all. But the economic impact of my node decides how much of an economic node I am. So let's say Coinbase's node processes transactions of hundreds of thousands of Bitcoiners. Bitrefill has a node that processes a lot of transactions. That node does not even necessarily have to hold any considerable amount of Bitcoin. Like an economic node does not have to have Bitcoin. They just have to like route payments, or the effect of that node suddenly disappearing decides how impactful that economic node would have been. So
okay, so just to recap, so it matters what the most economic nodes are by transaction volume, because they provide and effectively make liquidity possible. But a node that doesn't transact anything doesn't add anything to the network. So it doesn't matter whether it's there or not.
It is a non-zero effect that you have if you have 800,000 Bitcoin, or if you have 100,000 Bitcoin, or somebody who self-custodies 0.1 Bitcoin is probably not as important as somebody who self-custodies 10 Bitcoin, because in the event of a hard fork, that person, as you earlier mentioned correctly, has more power to affect the price by dumping the other chain.
Yeah.
You have to have Bitcoin to make your chain valuable. If only people that don't have Bitcoin fork the client, that client, like the new
who cares?
Bitcoin, nobody cares about. So so in the future, what have we learned from BIP110? That proposal was disastrous. It was poorly written. It had a ton of bugs. It had not enough peer review. The peer review that was provided was most of the time rejected from the authors. Even the most neutral BIP editors like quit in frustration working with those people. And trying to set the bar as low as 55% was already like dooming this entire operation to fail. It was a non-starter. It was dead on arrival, and all the theories about game theory have been beautifully disproven. And it was a sight to behold to see some of those live streams on the BIP110 supporting site. And I truly believe we will have soon a new soft fork. Like we're talking currently about BIP444 that fixes 4 actually critical vulnerabilities in Bitcoin that actually exist and that could make funny things. And we don't have to deal with this right now because some of those problems are way in the future. Some of those problems are real and existing right now, like poison blocks, something we can also like talk about sometime. But these things, I think, are more well thought out, and like this, like BIP444, this cleanup. I think Matt Coralla proposed it in 2015. So that shows you the time frame in which we change Bitcoin. And only in those years you can reach a sufficient amount of people, and you can essentially reach a sufficient amount of code review and polished code so that you do not make something similar to like the cold card bug or something into Bitcoin. So let's not ossify Bitcoin, but if we affect consensus changes, let's tread carefully and slowly, and don't like rush and bend people over a barrel.
Chris, this is where we end things. It's been 80 minutes of full nerd blasting knowledge across all the channels from Italy to South Africa. I want to give my absolute kudos to you. I think you are a big asset to the community. You are a treasure trove of knowledge.
Yes,
and
stop the glazing. Thank you. Good
deeply
night.
interested, and
Cut
you
it.
are extremely good at verbalizing as well. Like, this is very important.
Incredibly
Right? It's
handsome.
one thing
Yes,
to
I
understand the
understood that.
stuff.
Thank you.
So at the end of the day, I'm the funny guy, funnier than you, and you're more handsome than me. That's what we conclude. All right. We'll let the viewers decide.
Yes.
It's not for us to decide. It's anarchy. But no, on a serious note, this has been very, very great. I learned a lot, and I know my viewers will as well, because at the end of the day, most people on here will be dumb, profit-oriented miners.
And
but this is the kind of stuff why the hash rate matters. So again, thank you so much for your time. You are very easy to find. I can only advise everybody that made it to this point. If you don't follow Chris already, do that now. And also suggest or also consider to secure the hard-earned Bitcoin that you do have, that you did mine in whatever shape or form.
Yes.
No. We will, dude. It's going to be in the. You can't do anything about it anyway. So consider securing your mindsets with a Seedor kit. It's great fun. Thank you again, Chris, for doing this.
And if you're looking for insurance, I'm your Bitcoin insurance guy.
There
we also
do
data centers and mining operations. Let's go. And if you want to meet me, come to Bitcoin Asia. When does this drop? Like Bitcoin Hong Kong in the August?
Hopefully tomorrow. Ben, tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
We have to get this out timely. Yeah, no, for sure. Meet Chris there, meet him online. And thank you, Chris. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.